So without further ado, I'm going to launch into my mini talk. So this is going to be about an app that my team at SteamClock and I recently launched that is built in Swift, and it's a Mac app I'm excited about, called Quests. And Quests came from this idea and this kind of realization of, wouldn't it be nice if, inspired by the fact that we are often working on a lot of different projects. So some teams are pretty much all focused in, if 30 people all developing one app or one product at a time. At SteamClock, we are 12 people, often developing 5 products at a time, or sometimes as many as 10, depending on the different points in the life cycle that these different apps are in. So that means almost everyone on the team has multiple repos that they're dealing with, sometimes a lot of repos that they're dealing with, sometimes across different source control systems, across different, we have a client that uses GitLab and one that uses GitHub and one that uses a different GitHub. And so it can be a little bit all over the place when you are getting issues assigned to you. And this has always been the case, but it's gotten particularly bad as we get more and more into doing pull requests. And so this is this flow of when you're trying to make a commit, ideally, anytime someone's making a commit, it's been reviewed by someone else, and sometimes even 2 or 3 other people in certain cases. And that flow is great, but if you accumulate a lot of pull requests, you will block people, and blocking people is bad. We get pull requests assigned to people, and it'll be really great if I merge this in now, but you just don't notice, or maybe it gets buried in all of the huge amounts of spam email that GitHub generates. And we were finding that people were getting blocked, and then pull requests would slowly accumulate merge conflicts, and it wasn't super smooth. So we thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could just see the pull requests that are assigned to you in your Mac's menu bar? And it turns out it is nice. So we built Quests, and that's what it looks like. So it's basically just a menu bar app, and it syncs with your github.com or gitlab.com, and it pulls in your different projects. So it sorts to the top the ones that have pull requests. You can see the little pull request issue, and so depending on what you might need to, don't want to forget that you have to eat a bagel, promote synergy, talk to corporate, and so you have all of those boss tasks lined up for you. And of course, we pull in the little tabs, the labels from GitHub and stuff like that. And so in some ways, it's kind of one of those so obvious, you just say, hey, it shows your issues, and then it just does that in a menu bar app, and there it is, and it is what it does. But we actually learned a few things. We learned 5 things that I'm going to talk about, and then a lot of more things, because this is our first Mac app, and it's the first app that we built like this, so I thought it'd be interesting to talk about a couple of things that we learned. So it's a Mac app, and we're iOS developers. So I previously worked on Mac apps years ago, but almost all, the last 8 years, been working primarily on iOS. And the Mac is a different thing, and so we were kind of a little intimidated by that. The APIs are going to be different. Some of the things are quite different. And so initially we're a little kind of oh, what do we get ourselves into? But we started to realize, pretty quickly, I know this. This is something I understand, because it's Swift, and all of our most of the CocoaPods that we use actually still can work. We can use all the networking stuff. We can use the Swift linting and stuff like that. A lot of the stuff we can still use, but of course, there's some parts that are difficult. The UI stuff is totally different. And one of the things that we are hitting a lot is just things. We are very practiced at making iOS apps be good. And we're not as practiced at making Mac apps be good. So, we release 1.0 and somebody just opens our settings window and then just makes it really wide. And it just doesn't render properly at all. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that bug. I've seen that bug in other apps. And on iOS apps, we know to test for all those kind of equivalent things. On the Mac, we're not yet practiced at it. But my kind of little tidbit out of that is if you're thinking about making a Mac app, you don't need marzipan or any other almond-flavored confections in order to be able to make a Mac app if you're an iOS developer. The UI stuff is different, but most of your skills will port over. So the second thing that we learned is that updates are actually kind of hard to do right. So this is something we took for granted on iOS because on iOS, the App Store just does the updates to end users automatically, and we're actually distributing Quests for now on the Mac App Store, so it's the same way to actual end users. But for betas and internal betas and QA builds and stuff like that, on iOS we use Buddy Build, to get the feedback and builds out really fast, which is excellent on iOS and doesn't exist for the Mac or Android anymore, RIP. And we also can't use test flight because there's no test flight for the Mac. I think maybe Apple has said that they're going to do that. I know that they brought a lot of features across from iOS App Store, but there's still no test flight for the Mac. So those things obviously are not as important on the Mac as they are on iOS, because on iOS you just can't just download and install an app. But now we're so used to auto updates and update notifications and all of that stuff being streamlined that it feels really archaic. And in practice, people just weren't updating the app. If we're just like, hey, there's a new version of Quests, check it out. And all the developers on the team would be like, sounds good. And then they just don't. And so we had like this one big regression, and like, it's like, hey, anyone see any problems? And everyone's like, no, it's working. It's just, no one had updated, so we didn't know that there was a regression. So this update stuff is hard, and actually coding it, we kind of under-resourced making sure it was coded well. Like things like, oh, the paths, once we got an extra digit or there was a space in it, like it's one of those things that we just had never really taken very seriously because it's just kind of been free to us that we had to do a bit of work. And then like Sparkle is the tool that everyone uses for Mac updating, but it doesn't work well with the code signing and the notarization and all the stuff you're supposed to do to make an Mac app secure. It doesn't actually play well with that, and it just fails and stuff. So updating is a little hard. So just be wary of that if you're doing a Mac app. Number 3 is you get to make cool icons. So on a Mac, it doesn't have to be a round rect. You can make any shape you want. You can make it a weird Q with an exclamation mark, or you can make it a clown or whatever you want. And so that was fun for us, and we got to do a little bit more, also because it's a side project, we got a little bit more, do some shadows, get a little bit of skeuomorphism back there. I think we might sneak kind of a little more skeuomorphism in there because we miss it. It's been long enough. We can bring back the shadows. I think it's time. So number 4 lesson we learned is the tale of 2 source control systems. So we support GitHub and GitLab in Quests, and they're pretty comparable in a lot of ways, and a lot of the functionality around this stuff that you can just get pull requests and everything, so that was pretty seamless. But when we started seeding out builds, we started hearing from people that, oh, hey, can you let us put in a custom URL because we use GitHub Enterprise or we use GitLab self-hosted? And so we were like, hey, that's actually makes sense. I mean, we'd have to do extra testing and get like our own GitHub Enterprise and all that stuff to be able to test it out, but that could be a good feature and a sort of feature people would pay for. And so we kind of released 1.0 as the like github.com, gitlab.com tested out thing. And now we're building Quests Pro, which will support these kind of more advanced deployments. And that'll be our little subscription, $10 a year or something, figure out what people will pay for it. And that was our business model plan, and it still is for the most part. But I was really fascinated to see the difference in emails I got from these 2 groups of people. The GitHub Enterprise people send emails, would say, hey, are you going to add GitHub Enterprise support? And I would say, yeah, we're planning on doing a subscription called Quest Pro, and it will support this. And do you want to be notified? And they were like, yeah, great. One of them was like, oh, my company has 10,000 developers using GitHub Enterprise, and we might be able to do a whole site license, and we're really excited to be a trial partner for you, and we might do a security audit for you because that's part of the necessary rules to be used here, but that could be great. And so really great feedback from the GitHub Enterprise people. The GitLab self-hosted people were like, you want me to pay money for software? No, what? They were not very happy with me. They kind of ranged from kind of slightly annoyed to actively hostile. And what I didn't realize is that this GitLab self-hosted, I thought of it as something that people would use if they're like, oh, the GitLab can't handle our scale. We've got hundreds of thousands of developers all checking in, so we need to host it ourselves on these amazing machines or super security requirements, which there is some of that. But there's even more people who are like, I have to pay $5 a month for GitLab. I'll just run it on a computer under my desk. So those people are not going to want to pay $10 a year to me to be able to see how many pull requests you're blocking people on. So that was a little bit of lesson. I still I'm not super enthusiastic about supporting all the people with the sketchy GitLab installations under their desks for free. So we may still end up charging for that. Pardon me. So that was kind of an interesting lesson. And the 5th one that we learned is that it's really great to ship things, which you may never have heard that idea before, that super common, obvious idea that it's good to ship things. And the reason I say this is because at Steam Clock we have a habit of really polishing stuff and try to make stuff great. And we don't use the word perfect, but in practice, that's kind of what we have a tendency to try and do, is perfect things and make things really amazing experiences and polish everything and make it beautiful before we ship it. And on client projects, sometimes that's what clients want us to do, and sometimes they only have a certain amount of budget, and so we have to ship before we get to our platonic ideal of this app. But for internal projects, we don't have anyone forcing us to ship it, so we can just keep iterating and iterating, and sometimes that's what we do, and in the past, that's what we've done. And so with this project, we made a specific thing and said, we will work on this in like extra time for 3 months, and once 3 months is up, we will add no more things, and we will not make it any prettier, and we'll ship it. And I was embarrassed in so many ways about how bad it was. But the things that people emailed me about were not the things I was embarrassed about. They were their problems. And so our entire roadmap completely changed as soon as we shipped it. Of things that things like this GitHub Enterprise thing now became top priority, and features and bugs and things that people cared about. So very common thing. Everyone knows you have to ship stuff and get feedback from real users. I know it. You all know it. But it's nice to have a reminder of, hey, it's good. We should ship stuff and get feedback instead of keep iterating in our little ivory tower. So those are my 5 things that I learned. 5 of the things we learned shipping quests. If you think that sounds interesting or appealing anyway, you can get it for free if you are a github.com or gitlab.com user at steampoke.com/quests, or you can search the Mac App Store for quests. If you are one of those fancy and or under the desk sketchy type users and are curious in trying out the beta or future versions of Quest Pro, then get in touch. You can either send us an email or talk to me. And yeah, that's quests.